Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last webinar of the week. Hopefully you can all hear me. Maybe one or two of you might just send in a quick message on the chat just to confirm that you can hear me. This morning's topic is emergency preparedness. As I said, it's our 9th webinar of the week. And just before I start, to thank everybody who participated and engaged and logged on and listened to each webinar during the week. And also we had, as well as the 9 webinars such as this one this morning, we also had about 10 or 12, I think, additional on-site talks with various groups. And overall, I think we've had close to 300 people attending throughout the week for the various sessions, which is very positive. Emergency preparedness is the topic this morning, and I suppose, look, there's just a couple of simple key principles around that. And just running through the slides, what is a workplace emergency? So look, just to clarify that for everybody, obviously a workplace emergency is a situation that threatens workers, customers, or the public, obviously disrupts or shuts down our operations, or potentially causes physical or environmental damage. Emergencies, as everyone knows, they can be natural, man-made, which may include floods, winter weather, chemical spills or releases, disease outbreaks, such as the current pandemic, a fire, and various other hazards that exist out in the workplace, whether on site, whether in a workshop, in one of our stores, or in one of our offices. Key, I suppose, note from this slide is to remember, in the event of an emergency, people always come first and foremost. Anybody who's in the presence of that particular incident or emergency, the people's safety is the first and foremost priority for everybody at that point in time before anything else. Why do we need to be prepared? Obviously, if we prepare well, in the unfortunate event that you are involved in an emergency situation, the better prepared you are, the better response you're going to have at that point in time. And as human beings and as individuals, we all respond differently to emergencies. We've all had various experiences of emergencies throughout our life. Some may have been potentially very serious and others not so serious, but we've all reacted in different ways. We're all human. Some people will panic and more people won't panic and will take control of the situation. So in the event of being prepared, the purpose of being prepared for an emergency is first and foremost is that we limit damage to human health, protect our people, minimize the damage to the environment and obviously property, and to prevent then obviously business and service interruption. Being prepared for an emergency, it involves a lot of preparation. That's why we have emergency plans. That's why we have procedures. And that's why we practice. We do various drills, maybe fire drills, chemical spill drills, people falling from height drills, what to do in various incidences that potentially could happen, so that when we are well prepared, we can deal with the incident when it actually does occur, and make sure that everyone stays safe and that we contain it and that we deal with it appropriately with the proper training and the proper PPE. So it's important when we do have emergency plans that everyone takes note of them, that you memorize them, that you're aware of them, and that you take the time to understand the steps that are required in accordance with that emergency plan. It's well thought out. It's a plan which will ensure that if you follow it, you will deal with that emergency incident as it arises, as you're presented with it at that point in time. And obviously, any plan needs to be well communicated to everyone on a site, and it needs to be fully understood by everybody. As I said, being prepared, first and foremost, if you can, please ensure you do not panic. The fight or flight syndrome, where some of us will run, some of us will panic, but it's important that if we can at all, remain calm. Obviously, when you are familiar with the site-specific emergency plan, whether that's on a site, an operate site, whether it's on a construction site, whether it's in one of our offices or manufacturing facility or any of our stores, know where your exits are. These all seem like common. They're taken as a given, but it's important that you reinforce the messaging within yourself each time that you're in a new environment, that you're at an office that you haven't been at a while, if you're on a construction site, if you're in a particular building or if you're in a particular location. Just familiarize yourself with the exit points, with the assembly points. You know, if you're in charge of a particular facility, ensure that the emergency exits are free and there's no obstructions in their way. As I've said, everyone needs to know where the assembly points are, know where the first aid kits are, or the defibs. In the instance of someone needs a defib unit, you know where they are. They must be clearly displayed. People need to know who the first aiders are on site and how they should be contacted. And you know, a list of those first aiders should be clearly noticeable to anyone that comes onto a particular site or into a particular building. You know, you need to know who you need to contact. So obviously that's where we have a list of emergency numbers that need to be contacted in sequence and in priority in the event of an emergency. And again, the onus is on all of us, but in particular on supervisors and managers, to ensure that any emergency equipment that needs to be provided is there, number one. Number two, that it's certified, it's operational, it's fit for purpose, and that it's easily accessible. Key one really, when you have to exit a facility, exit a building in the event of an emergency, is that, you know, people entering our buildings, our offices, or our sites, that you use the appropriate clock-in facility, whether that's a clock-in with your card, whether it's a clock-in with your phone, or whether it's a sign-on sheet or book, depending on what's made available for people, so that in the event of emergency, those responsible for accounting for each individual on that site has an accurate list of who physically is on site prior to the emergency incident occurring, so that they can account for everybody at the various assembly points post an incident occurring. You know, if you are going to leave the building or the site, make sure you sign out properly or you clock out accordingly, and that you inform whoever needs to be told of the fact that you're leaving. If you have people missing at an assembly point, you know, and you know of their whereabouts, you know, they may be in the building, they may have been distracted, or they may be somewhere where they haven't left the building for whatever reason. It's important that you notify the appropriate people in terms of taking the roll call, so that they're made aware of this. Do not attempt yourself to go back for somebody. And obviously visitors and contractors on our sites must also be informed of our emergency procedures as part of their induction onto any of our sites, so that they too are aware of our procedures for exiting a facility or a building in the event of an emergency. In the event of injury, you know, to personnel, you know, it's important, as I said, if somebody is injured, unfortunately in an incident on a site, it's critically important that someone takes control of the situation. You know, you need to assess the casualty situation, contact the site first aider in the first instance, and provide them with the information of the injury as you see it, and that all first aid equipment that's required is got and made available where it needs to be used. Contact obviously the site supervisor and manager. Obviously remain with the casualty until a first aider arrives. Do not remove the casualty unless they are in an immediate danger. And obviously then when a first aider that has been trained and knows what to do does arrive, that you follow their instructions from thereafter. You know, in the event of injury to personnel, we have to contact emergency services as you're instructed to do so by the first aider. And again, there should be a list of emergency numbers on that particular site, easily accessible and available, so that you have those numbers that you need to contact ready and available. You don't have to be going looking for them. Emergency services must be provided with a detailed report of the injuries, the location. You know, it's why it's important, I suppose, that we have the data points, you know, the GPS coordinates of the particular site, you know, and people should be aware of those so they can get to that location quicker. If the casualty is evacuated to a hospital, you know, you obviously need to obtain the name of that hospital and the point of contact so that we have that information. And if the casualty has been exposed to chemicals, if the incident is surrounding a chemical spill or a release of gases from chemicals, you need to ensure that the relevant, you know, the safety data sheets for that chemical are made available to the first responders so that they have that on their route back to the hospital, and also maybe fax it to the hospital or care facility as well. In the event of a fire, you know, obviously you need to alert Everybody, you need to set off the alarm if that hasn't occurred. You need to make everyone aware as quickly as possible. Then you need to exit the building. You need to go obviously to the nearest break point for the last break point to create that notification for the evacuation siren. Obviously, if it's on a construction site, there are other means of providing that emergency alert. And alternatively, obviously, you can call out to people to clear a particular area or a particular site or a particular part of a building. If it's safe to do so, obviously, close windows and doors behind you. Evacuate through the nearest exit to your assembly point, which you should already be aware of, and inform any site supervisors, site incident controllers of the status of the fire as you've seen it. Remain at that assembly point until you receive the all clear from a site supervisor or those in charge that it's safe to leave it. And obviously in the event of a minor fire, you obviously try to contain that in using the appropriate fire extinguishers or blankets or sprays that will be available in that location, but only if you're trained to do so and it's safe to do so. And never attempt it on your own. Remain on the exit side of the fire. And if it's a large fire, evacuate to your assembly point, as I've already said. And please don't put yourself or others in danger. Again, in the event of a fire, on hearing of an alarm, you evacuate through the nearest exit to your assembly point and follow the instructions of the various site supervisors or site incident controllers at that particular time. If it's safe to do so, as I've said, close windows behind you and doors. Again, remain at your assembly point. Critical you stay there until such time as someone in authority makes you aware that it's safe to leave that assembly point. Again, you need to stay there and be accounted for. If we move on to the potential of, an emergency event where you've got a spillage of a hazardous substance, particular chemical, again, you need to assess the situation. If you've no knowledge of the spillage, do not enter the area. Consult the relevant safety data sheets. They'll be available on that site to get the relevant information on that particular chemical. It could be chemicals as well. Inform the supervisor or manager relevant to that site. Check for any ignition sources that are potentially in that adjacent environment to the spill. Check the atmosphere for hazardous gases using a portable gas monitor that should be available to you on that site. And if the area is deemed to be unsafe, you obviously do not enter. If safe to do so, ventilate the area until the atmosphere is safe, according to the gas portable monitor. Again, locate the nearest spill kit, and if necessary, seal off the area, evacuate to assembly point, and again, complete the roll call. Containing the spillage then, provided all of the other aspects have been accounted for and catered for, and provided you have the appropriate PPE available to you, the relevant safety data sheets, and you've had the relevant training, you obviously continue then to monitor the atmosphere for flammable gases. You do not enter if it's unsafe, and you do ensure that all personnel are well upwind of the area and safe from any potential gases that could be carried by wind. If it's safe and you are trained to do so, you can start the process of soaking up any liquid spills with, inert absorbent materials as identified in the safety data sheet. And in particular, do not dilute a spillage area of any chemical with water. If applicable, prevent the spillage from entering the water system by using, spill booms, if they're available to you, and where possible, close off, the surface water discharge valve if that's available in a particular contained area, and just make sure that you do what you can to prevent the spillage progressing into the water environment adjacent to the particular area on that site. And again, make sure any materials that are used to clear up any spillages are stored in appropriate bins and disposed of by a licensed hazardous waste contractor who has a relevant waste license for sale. In terms of reporting, very important, any injuries sustained by employees, contractors, visitors, environmental incidents or property damage must be reported immediately to your supervisor and site manager. If they're not available, report it to the responsible line director. The supervisors then in turn obviously must notify the HSQE department and our HR manager and the financial director in a timely manner. In the absence of the supervisor manager, the HSQE manager, or a member of the HSQE department, the human resource manager and the financial director must be contacted directly. This is a very important point because we've had incidents over the last 7 or 8, 9 years where people have potentially sustained injuries as a result of a workplace accident or incident, or an alleged workplace accident or incident, but it hasn't been reported to EPS for a number of weeks, and in one case, a number of months after a potential suggested incident. This has implications around insurance, it has implications for the business, and it has implications for the business. So it's critically important that stuff gets reported at the time and as soon as possible after the incident, and that person has had the various medical care that they need. It's then critical that those responsible in terms of site supervisors, managers, and that employee in person, if they're in a position to do so, you need to inform the business. Our HSQE department needs to be made aware that day. Our financial director needs to be made aware that day, and our HR manager needs to be made aware that day, because we need to make our insurers aware that day. So that's a very important, critical one to remember. And finally, if you have any questions or you require any additional information, you can contact and get that information from your supervisor, your line manager, or just contact our HSQE department directly. Safety issues, they can be discussed with the safety champion for your area, for your division. The list of safety champions across the country are available to everybody. If you're not aware who they are, please ask, but those lists should be accessible for everybody. And our safety committee continues to be chaired by Sharon O'Connor, who's based in our Mallow office. And again, just some reminders around our COVID-19 prevention measures. And just one final suggestion, emergency preparedness, and again, just reflecting back on various types of incidents or various types of emergencies can occur. But if you wanted to look at a suggested film, there's a great film on Netflix on the Deepwater Horizon disaster back in 2010 off the coast of North America, off Louisiana, the BP oil disaster. That's a good film, but in that there's a lot of examples that are very good, and there's a lot of examples that are very poor and very bad, in fact, in terms of emergency preparedness. In there you get a lot of examples of complacency from a very high level of management. You get examples of complacency on the rig itself. You get very good examples of PPE. You get poor examples of PPE not being appropriate or not being available. You get some examples in there around training and the importance of training. But most importantly, you get examples of leadership, and leadership coming from individuals that you least expect it from in the event of an emergency. Now, I know it's not comparable to, hopefully any emergency we will ever experience or any of you will ever experience on any of our sites, because of that was on an oil rig and a particular fire. But there's a lot of lessons to be learned from watching that film in a different way, and looking at it from I suppose, the perspective of an emergency, and how prepared were the people on that rig that night of that fire. How prepared was the business and their management and their policies and their procedures? Were they really looking after the health and safety of their employees? Were they providing all the necessary training and tools and PPE that was required to protect their employees? And then the employees themselves that were working on that rig that night, how did they step up and take their responsibilities, and take their responsibilities seriously in advance and working up to the incident, and then obviously when it happened and the post 1 hour or 2 hours after the incident, in terms of who responded and how they responded. So again, thanks everybody for your attention. Thanks in particular to everybody who coordinated, arranged and facilitated our initiatives and our webinars throughout this week, the Health and Safety Week, supported by the Construction Industry Federation. It's a hugely important topic. And for anyone who you were aware of that hasn't had the opportunity to sit in on or watch any or all or some of the webinars throughout the week, for various reasons, they're all available now on our YouTube channel. And I'd encourage people to take the time to go back and have a look at them and pick out the ones that are relevant to yourselves, and even do some of your toolbox talks over the coming weeks and months, led by your managers and supervisors, and just to maybe replay some of them so that everyone is fully clear and fully aware, and all of our thinking and behaviour is reinforced around health and safety, and what that means for us, what it means for us as a business, what it means for us all as employees and individuals, and more importantly, what it means for our families and the people that are at home that we go back to every evening. Thanks again. Take care.